Australia. The only country that is also an entire continent. A land where the wildlife seems designed by a committee that couldn't agree on anything, where summer happens in December, and where the world's largest living structure can be seen from space. This is Australia explained in 12 minutes. If you look at a map, Australia sits alone in the southern hemisphere, surrounded by the Indian and Pacific Oceans. It is the sixth largest country on Earth, spanning roughly 4,000 kilometers from east to west and 3,200 kilometers from north to south. To put that in perspective, you could fit the entire United Kingdom into Australia more than 31 times. And yet, despite this enormous landmass, Australia has one of the lowest population densities in the world. Most of its 27 million people live along the coastal fringes, leaving the vast interior largely empty. This interior is the outback, a word that captures something more than just geography. It describes a red-earthed, sun-scorched heartland where distances are measured in days of driving, not hours. The outback covers roughly 70% of the continent and includes deserts like the Great Victoria, the Gibson, and the Simpson, where sand dunes roll for hundreds of kilometers and temperatures can exceed 50 degrees Celsius. But Australia is not all desert. The north is tropical, with monsoon rains and dense rainforests. The southeast enjoys a temperate climate with 4 distinct seasons. Tasmania, the island state to the south, sits in the path of the Roaring Forties and feels more like New Zealand than mainland Australia. This climatic diversity means Australia grows everything from tropical fruits in Queensland to cool climate wines in Tasmania and wheat across the vast plains of the Murray-Darling Basin. Long before European ships appeared on the horizon, Australia was home to the world's oldest continuous civilization. Aboriginal Australians arrived on the continent at least 65,000 years ago, crossing land bridges and short sea passages from Southeast Asia during a period of lower sea levels. Over tens of thousands of years, they developed more than 250 distinct language groups, each with its own territory, customs, and dreaming stories that explain the creation of the land, the animals, and the people. The dreaming is not mythology in the Western sense. It is a living framework that connects past, present, and future, tying every rock formation, waterhole, and constellation to ancestral beings who shaped the world. Aboriginal art, with its intricate dot paintings and crosshatching, is one of the world's oldest artistic traditions. Rock art in places like Kakadu and the Kimberley dates back more than 20,000 years, making it older than the cave paintings of Lascaux. When Europeans first encountered this civilization, they failed to understand it. They declared the land terra nullius, meaning nobody's land, a legal fiction that would have devastating consequences for centuries to come. The first recorded European landing was by Dutch navigator Willem Janszoon in 1606, who mapped parts of the Cape York Peninsula. Other Dutch explorers followed, and for a time the continent was known as New Holland. But it was the British who came to stay. In 1770, Captain James Cook charted the eastern coastline and claimed it for Britain. 18 years later, the first fleet arrived in Botany Bay carrying more than 700 convicts. Why convicts? Britain had just lost its American colonies, which had previously served as a dumping ground for prisoners. Australia became the replacement. The early years were brutal. The settlers struggled to grow crops in unfamiliar soil. Conflict with Aboriginal people erupted as land was taken. But the colony survived, and soon free settlers began arriving, drawn by the promise of land and opportunity. In 1851, everything changed. Gold was discovered in New South Wales and Victoria, triggering a rush that doubled Australia's population in a single decade. Chinese miners, American fortune seekers, and European migrants poured in. The gold rush funded the construction of grand buildings in Melbourne and Sydney. It also incubated a distinctive Australian identity, egalitarian, skeptical of authority, and fiercely independent. By 1901, the 6 British colonies federated to form the Commonwealth of Australia. The 20th century shaped modern Australia in profound ways. At Gallipoli in 1915, Australian and New Zealand soldiers fought their first major battle as independent nations. The campaign was a military failure, but it forged the Anzac legend, a story of courage and mateship that remains central to Australian identity. Every April 25, Australians gather at dawn services across the country to remember. After the Second World War, Australia opened its doors. The slogan was "Populate or Perish."
Millions of migrants arrived from Italy, Greece, Germany, and later from Vietnam, Lebanon, and China.
Today, nearly half of all Australians were either born overseas or have at least one parent born overseas. This multicultural reality has transformed Australian culture. You can find Vietnamese pho next to Italian gelato, Greek Orthodox churches beside Buddhist temples, and one of the world's largest Lunar New Year celebrations outside of Asia in Sydney. Economically, Australia rode a wave of prosperity through the late 20th and early 21st centuries, powered by mining exports to China, a strong financial sector, and a booming housing market. It is one of the wealthiest nations on Earth by median wealth per adult.
If you ask someone what makes Australia unique, they will almost certainly mention the animals.
And for good reason.
Australia's wildlife is like nowhere else on the planet.
Because the continent has been isolated for roughly 50 million years, evolution took a different path here. The kangaroo and its smaller cousin the wallaby are marsupials, mammals that carry their young in pouches. There are more than 60 species of kangaroo in Australia, and in many parts of the country they outnumber people. The koala, despite looking like a teddy bear, is not a bear at all. It is another marsupial that lives almost entirely on eucalyptus leaves, which are toxic to most other animals. Then there is the platypus, an animal so strange that when the first specimen was sent to England, scientists thought it was a hoax sewn together from different creatures. It has a duck-like bill, a beaver-like tail, lays eggs like a reptile, and the male has venomous spurs on its hind legs.
Only in Australia.
The continent also has more venomous snakes than any other country, including the inland taipan, which possesses the most toxic venom of any snake. Yet snake bites are rare because these animals are shy and humans are not their prey. Offshore, the Great Barrier Reef stretches for 2,300 kilometers along the Queensland coast. It is the largest living structure on the planet, composed of nearly 3,000 individual reef systems and home to thousands of species of fish, coral, mollusks, and marine mammals. Most Australians live in cities, and these cities consistently rank among the most livable in the world. Sydney is the oldest and most famous, built around one of the world's most spectacular natural harbors. Its Opera House, with its iconic sail-like shells designed by Danish architect Bjørn Utzon, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most recognized buildings on the planet.
Melbourne, Australia's second city, is its cultural capital.
It is obsessed with coffee, street art, and sport, particularly Australian rules football, a fast-paced, high-flying game that is uniquely Australian.
Melbourne also hosts the Australian Open tennis tournament and the Formula One Grand Prix. Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide each have their own distinct character.
Brisbane is subtropical and relaxed, Perth is isolated on the west coast closer to Singapore than to Sydney, and Adelaide is known for its festivals and wine regions. Australian culture has produced globally recognized icons. In film, actors like Cate Blanchett, Hugh Jackman, and Chris Hemsworth. In music, AC/DC, Kylie Minogue, and Tame Impala. In literature, Patrick White won the Nobel Prize.
And then there is Australian sport.
The country punches far above its weight at the Olympics, regularly finishing in the top 10 despite having only the 55th largest population. Cricket is a national obsession, rugby league dominates the eastern states, and surfing is less a sport than a way of life. Beyond the cities and the beaches, Australia holds some of the world's most extraordinary natural wonders. Uluru, formerly known as Ayers Rock, rises 348 meters from the flat desert of the Red Centre. It is a sacred site for the Anangu people, and watching the sun set over Uluru as the rock shifts through shades of orange, red, and purple is one of the most profound experiences the continent offers. The Great Barrier Reef, as mentioned, is visible from space and contains an ecosystem so rich that scientists are still discovering new species within it. The 12 apostles along the Great Ocean Road in Victoria are limestone stacks that rise dramatically from the Southern Ocean, carved by wind and waves over millions of years.
Tasmania's wilderness, with its ancient temperate rainforests and jagged mountain peaks, is a haven for hikers and nature lovers.
Kakadu National Park in the Northern Territory combines extraordinary biodiversity with some of the oldest and most significant Aboriginal rock art sites in the world. And then there is the Daintree Rainforest in Queensland, one of the oldest tropical rainforests on Earth, predating the Amazon by tens of millions of years. Australia is a land of contradictions. It is ancient and modern, isolated and globally connected, harsh and breathtakingly beautiful. A place where the world's oldest living culture coexists with cutting-edge cities, where animals seem to have evolved on a different planet, and where the landscapes range from snow-capped mountains to coral reefs to deserts that stretch beyond the horizon.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through the land down under, subscribe and hit the bell for more country documentaries every week. See you in the next one.